Stay tuned for Truckers Life Radio, coming up next on tncradio.live.
You're listening to tncradio.live. Remember to tune into the Truckers Network Show with Shelley Johnson, weekdays at 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern. Hello and welcome to tncradio.live. This is Truckers Life Radio. And now here's your host, Ron Frazier.
Welcome to Truckers Life Radio. I am your host, Ron Frazier, and my guest today is Debbie Wright. Debbie is the president of Do What's Right Production, and Debbie was also and is also the director and producer of a documentary called From Liberty to Captivity that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But Debbie started out with a background in journalism. And so, Debbie, I'd love you to tell us a little bit about your history. How'd you go into journalism and where did that lead you?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be on the radio program. I hope we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit about how involved your organization was in the production of From Liberty to Captivity, and how, a couple of amazing stories were profiled in the film. But yes, I started out as a journalism major. My mom and her production partner read an article in a magazine, in Chicago Magazine in the 70s, about the elderly who were kind of the throwaways in Chicago. They were living in places where there was no heat. They were eating canned food. Nobody was really looking out for them. And it broke their hearts, and they decided that they wanted to do a story, and they decided they wanted to work on a documentary, which was not really a concept that a lot of people knew about. And so they profiled this story of these volunteers who would go in and they would really love on and care for these elderly people that they had no connection to. And the amazing, stories of hope and love that came out of this connection made between these elderly people and these volunteers. And so that's kind of what I grew up with. I was a latchkey kid, and my mom was really busy working on this documentary. I remember cameras all around and different people coming in and out of the house. And I remember the grand opening, the premiere of the film at this great theater in Chicago, and the red carpet event, and just the passion that my mom had for, getting the truth out about people who were, underserved and victims. And that's what inspired me to want to become a journalism major. So I was a journalism major in college, was a feature editor for the, school paper, college newspaper. And then just through a series of circumstances and honestly just trying to keep myself fed and clothed and housed, I took a temporary position at a business company in Chicago, and eventually switched to business and kind of left my journalism dreams in the dust, and then started working on this business career that I carefully crafted for many years until the day that changed my life forever and kind of brought me into the world of human trafficking in a way that I hadn't anticipated, and caused me to make a very life-changing decision.
So, Debbie, let's talk for a minute. You talked about the idea that you went into a business career. As I understand it, you started a consulting firm. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was in the pharmaceutical industry for many years, working on cancer drugs, and as well as neurology and some other areas. And then was kind of in and out of consulting, started my own consulting firm to work with different companies in the healthcare / pharmaceutical industry.
Okay. And then, as I understand it, you went into the University of Pennsylvania to get an educational degree.
I always had a heart for education. Early on in my business career, I actually was a trainer. And I had been traveling so much for work, and I was getting pretty burned out, as you can imagine, in consulting and some of the other positions I'd taken. So I actually just wanted to try something different. I went in, got my master's degree, and actually left business for a while and was teaching elementary school students. So pre-K through second grade are the ages of the kids that I worked with. And it was an amazing experience, but I think it really highly sensitized me to the kinds of issues like human trafficking that I've dedicated my life to now.
Debbie, we talk a lot here at TFC Global about the idea that people don't really pay attention to human trafficking or issues like that until it's right in front of them, until it slaps them in the face. And I understand that you had a similar experience, something about the FBI raiding your neighbor's house. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I really did get the slap in the face. As I mentioned, I was, very well into my career and had sort of my, next 20 years or whatever of my life laid out and how I was going to progress and retire and all that. And one night I saw the FBI raid my neighbor's house. Now I live in an unincorporated town in eastern Pennsylvania. And we could not get information from the police about why they raided my neighbor's house. So this was 2 houses behind me. And I knew that there was a gentleman who was living there with his father, and also he had custody of his son. And we understood that he was the target of this raid. And the only thing that we were able to get from the police was that the people who don't have children in the neighborhood should not be concerned. And that was really alarming. But that's all the information that we could get. And then a few weeks later, honestly, I had forgotten about what had happened. And I was just sort of going on in my life until one day I went out to the mailbox, which is across the street from my house, and opened up the mailbox. And inside was this envelope with the letters written on it, FYI. And I opened up the envelope, and inside was a copy of the newspaper article, which explained what had happened with my neighbor. And much to my shock and horror, I found out that the raid on my neighbor's house had been for possession. They'd arrested him for possession and distribution of child pornography, including the rape of babies. And as I was standing in the street, I have no words to describe what happened to me other than to say that it felt like, the heavens opened up and there was like a crossroad that I could clearly see. It was like God was saying to me, so what are you going to do? Are you going to ignore, what literally is happening in your own neighborhood 2 houses away from you? Or are you going to just continue on your own little path of, your plans for your life and your retirement? And it was a really tough moment in my life, but having worked with children and having such a heart for kids who were victimized, to me, it became less about, do I make this decision, and more about how do I get involved, because it seemed like such an overwhelming issue. I didn't know where to begin, but God had plans, and really great plans to get me involved.
Yeah, and I think people aren't aware that this isn't just an issue in the trucking industry. This is an issue in the neighborhoods, in the schools, and you were talking about, or at least your bio talked a little bit about, we're not talking 100 pictures here. We're talking thousands of pictures of children being brutalized and being raped and being abused. And I don't know that the public is aware that this is going on to the extent that it is. Debbie, this sent you into a mindset of getting a hold of the International Justice Mission. Why was that, and how did that come about?
I don't honestly know. It's so funny. I didn't know where to start to get involved, and then God brought back to my memory that I had actually ripped out an article out of some magazine that I was reading about human trafficking. I don't even know when that happened. And I had filed it away, in my drawers, for like future things to work on or something like that. So I went into that drawer, and it was wonderful because the article talked about different kinds of organizations, and I read about International Justice Mission, and I just loved their heart for what they were doing. I love that they would go into countries and they would work to change the infrastructure and use local people to make sure that whatever they were doing was a long-term fix, not a short-term, Band-Aid solution. I love that they were doing legislative campaigns and awareness raising throughout the United States, combined with what they were doing around the world. I love that they had a very strong business and legal mindset in how they were approaching things. So they just weren't sort of a bleeding heart, but ineffective. And sometimes that happens, unfortunately, with organizations, that they approach things with a great heart for the issue that they're involved with, but they don't have a sense of, how to operate a business. So that's what made me contact them. And before I knew it, I was involved in legislative efforts and raising awareness and fully sucked into the world of human trafficking and advocating in the fight against it.
Good. Well, Debbie, we're going to pick this up. I want to talk a little bit more about what you did for them. And then we want to get into the actual talk a little bit about liberty to captivity and how you brought that project to fruition, however, but how you brought it to a reality. But we need to go to break first, so we'll just ask our listeners to stay tuned, and we'll be right back with Debbie Wright.
This blog on tncradio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. Quick and healthy meals for truckers. Life on the road can make it challenging for truckers to find a healthy meal. Truckers are on the go and sometimes on a strict time frame to get their loads delivered on time. Stopping at a truck stop for fast food sounds like the most convenient option. Although it may be more convenient, eating unhealthy gas station food can take a toll on one's health. Plus, it can be more expensive. Stopping at a grocery store and picking up healthy foods can benefit truckers in many ways. Eating healthy improves mood, health, and well-being. Consider investing in appliances like a cooler, slow cooker, lunchbox, or a microwave. This will make eating healthy on the road much easier. Breakfast. The most important meal of the day, especially for truckers. Eating a good breakfast helps keep your energy up. Oatmeal is a quick and easy healthy breakfast. You can make it in under 3 minutes, and it's easy to store in your cabin. Tip: adding some fresh fruits and nuts in your oatmeal can make it even more delicious. Yogurt makes a great breakfast. It's high in protein and can keep you full for a long time. Try adding some fruits, nuts, and honey. Toast and peanut butter. You'll need a toaster or a toaster oven for this one. Peanut butter contains high levels of protein, fiber, and healthy fats. It also gives you endless energy. Protein bars are the quickest breakfast option. It's safe to eat while driving. If you're in a hurry, protein bars will make a great breakfast. Lunch. It can be very tempting to pull over and stop at your favorite restaurant. Lunchtime's a great opportunity to make healthier choices. Some favorite healthy lunch meals are the bento box lunch with loads of healthy, clean foods. It's quick and easy, too. Burrito bowls are full of fresh veggies and just take 10 minutes to make. Ham sandwich, a classic, easy lunch. Chicken salad takes about 30 minutes to prepare, but it's well worth it. Serve it on lettuce or any type of bread you like. Dinner? This is where a slow cooker will definitely come in handy. Honey garlic chicken and veggies is the easiest one-pot recipe ever. Hardly takes any effort at all. Beef stew makes a great dinner. You can enjoy it all year round. Whole roasted chicken in your slow cooker's a recipe every trucker should try. It's delicious and can keep you fed for a couple of days. Ground beef and potatoes are amazing and will only take you about 15 minutes to prepare. This blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
You're listening to Truckers Life Radio on tncradio.live.
Trucking Moves America Forward, or TMAF, is boosting the image of the industry by telling the story of trucking, and your story can be part of it. Upload a photo, tell us what you love about trucking, or send us a story about a good deed or charitable act in trucking. Be sure to follow us on social media and contact us through truckingmovesamerica.com. That's truckingmovesamerica.com.
Welcome back to Truckers Life Radio. I'm your host, Ron Frazier, and we're talking today with Debbie Wright. And Debbie, it's such a pleasure to have you on. And you were sharing before the break about being involved with the International Justice Mission, and you became a justice advocate for them. Tell us what that is and what that means and what you did for them, and maybe how others could be involved if that's still possible.
Yeah, it's a great organization. They work in different countries around the world to address different kinds of oppression and violence. And so they really take a look at the landscape of a particular country and identify what the greatest needs are. So in some countries, it's land grabbing, honestly, for, widows, and corruption of trying to take their land away. In other situations, it's obviously human trafficking. And they've been really successful. Their model of mobilizing volunteers in the US and around the world to raise awareness, to be a part of legislative campaigns, and to educate people about how they can get involved, especially churches. They find that partnering with churches is such a powerful thing because churches, have a heart, God's heart for injustice and trying to help those that are victimized and often don't know what to do. Like I didn't know what to do as an individual. So they're very well organized and they have great partnerships with different organizations including churches to be involved in supporting their efforts around the world and legislative campaigns. So I was involved in all of that. Laws that were, in the books to be passed in the United States. I would go around and I would educate people on the issue and try to help them get involved with the issue, because there's so many different ways that you can get involved, not just with International Justice Mission. There's probably local organizations even in your own community, in your own state, that you can support who really would like the support. And so I did that for several years while I was still working in my business career. And the thing that struck me over and over again is that people were so excited and felt such a sense of purpose of helping the initiatives that were going on overseas, but they were really reluctant to accept the reality that it was happening in their own backyards. And so many times I would wish that I could bring certain experts that I had crossed paths with in my journey who were working on cases in the United States with me so that people could understand that this is in fact happening in our own neighborhoods. The internet especially has made this more prolific and more acceptable, more accessible across the board because of the anonymity and because of the ease of which that you can obtain victims and whether you're a trafficker or whether you're a buyer. And people just were having a really hard time accepting that. And that's what sort of made me switch gears and decide that I was going to produce the documentary From Liberty to Captivity.
So that's a good lead in, Debbie. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the documentary. How did you put together a plan to create this project and make it become a reality? And what is that documentary all about?
Well, it really was God's plan because I had no intention of working on a documentary. I just thought that I would do my part in volunteering with International Justice Mission. And I honestly had such a passion for this that people often told me I should be working on this part-time because no matter where I crossed paths with people, I was always talking about human trafficking. It was just something that grabbed a hold of me. And I just felt everyone needs to be aware of this and everyone needs to get involved in some capacity. And so I was asked to actually be on a radio show, ironically, and the gentleman who had the radio show then asked me to produce another show with him about what was happening in Pennsylvania. And I was kind of in a lull at work. I had just gotten a promotion. I was waiting for all my equipment to come in and to onboard in my new position. And so I had a little bit of time. And so I started, helping this guy produce this show. And as a great researcher and producer, I Googled anti-trafficking organizations in Pennsylvania. The first lady that I called, who ended up in From Liberty to Captivity, and we're actually good friends, she was based out of Lancaster, and we had this wonderful conversation about this amazing story that she had about helping to break up sort of an international ring in the Lancaster area. And by the end of that call, and she only knew me as a business person. She didn't know that my mom had produced a documentary and that I was started out as a journalism major. She said to me, we really should produce a documentary about human trafficking in Pennsylvania. And I said, oh, that's a great idea. And I hung up the phone and I thought, who says that to someone? She doesn't even know me. And I just knew that it was God. I knew that God was saying to me, this is the next thing I want you to do, because people really do need to understand that it is happening in large cities and rural areas and small towns everywhere. And so within a couple of days after praying and seeking counsel, I literally quit my job, took all of my money, and started a production company, started the film with a couple of friends of mine. None of us had produced a documentary before, but I knew how to manage business projects. This is where the business world came in so strongly to help me. I knew how to be a really good project manager. So I literally bought books on producing documentaries, opened up to the chapters, where we were in production, started putting feelers out to hire a crew and to identify people to be in the film. I already had a sense of what the storyline should be. And, step by step, with a lot of fear, hanging off the edge of the cliff, 5 years later, we completed From Liberty to Captivity.
Yeah, we're familiar with it. Debbie is actually, as you know, a part of our staff had some involvement in that film, but share with us, what is the basis of the film? What did you do in the film to bring awareness to the human trafficking issue and also to the pornography issue, which feeds human trafficking?
Right. So I actually sat down when I first started working on the film, and I basically mapped out hubs and spokes, like looking at what feeds into human trafficking and what comes out of human trafficking. Almost everything I learned about human trafficking in all the years I've been involved at a high level. And I really wanted for people by the end of the film to walk away with a comprehensive understanding of what fuels human trafficking, what the impact of human trafficking is, the role that everyday citizens play in it, and to understand that it's slavery. That was the other thing, that people have compartmentalized human trafficking and slavery. And of course, we know the United States has an unfortunate history with slavery, but it's slavery nonetheless. And so people, a lot of times when they look back at the history of slavery, of course, they say that it was wrong and that people should have fought against it, and it was right that it was made illegal, and, and all of this other stuff. But then when they think about human trafficking, they just think differently about it. They think differently about the women who are walking the streets. They think that these, women and, even males are doing this willingly. They don't really understand all that feeds into it, that comes together in a human trafficking interaction, so to speak. And so I mapped it all out, and that's when I started putting feelers out. A lot of people were like, well, what other films have you worked on? And I was like, well, none. And I just had some people who really believed in the vision for the film, who took a chance on me and put their reputations on the line professionally and connected me with other people. And so we really wanted to go a different direction than a lot of other human trafficking films have gone. One aspect, for example, is the trucking industry. I really didn't know of any other films that had highlighted the role that the trucking industry, transportation industry, plays for bad in certain situations, but also for good. And just pornography was something that people also had compartmentalized and didn't realize how it fuels human trafficking. They didn't realize that many times victims are, forced to be in these videos, that oftentimes they're used as training for people to perform acts that are seen in the pornography videos, because buyers then want, watch a video and then they want to perform those acts, but they don't realize the impact on the, women or men who are boys who are having to act this out, what the impact is to their bodies, to their souls, to their spirits. It seems like when you watch a pornography video, it seems like so much fun and the woman is having so much fun and it's all amazing, but people don't realize behind the scenes, the coercion, the force that's going into it, in many cases, the drugs that are used so that a woman doesn't feel the pain of what's happening and the after effects and the psychological impact that she's sort of numb to it. And so that's what made me decide to do a film that was radically different than anything that anyone had ever seen. And the impact of it and what happened with it was truly amazing.
Well, we've got to go to break, but when we come back, the film asks the question, how could America go from being a country that represents freedom to a country where sex trafficking and slavery are flourishing? What a great question. And when we come back, we're going to talk about that. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Dr. Christopher Cortman, and now for the Mental Health Minute. My third grade teacher, Mrs. Tuminello, used to say, "A word to the wise," and we would all have to say in unison, "is sufficient." Well, I have learned after 35 plus years of therapy, a word to the wise isn't always sufficient. In fact, sometimes we need to be encouraged. We need to be reminded. We need to get a second DUI. We need to have somebody walk out on us. We need our physician to say, "If you don't stop smoking next year, I'll be here for the physical, but you won't." Sometimes we need to have things repeated over and over until we finally get it. And sometimes it takes many words to the wise to be sufficient. And Mrs. Tuminello, God bless you wherever you might be at this time.
I'm Shelley Johnson with Kathy Tuccaro. You can hear us Tuesdays on tncradio.live at 8 p.m. Eastern on Women Road Warriors. And don't miss Steve Summers' Overnight Drive right here on tncradio.live, weeknights midnight to 5 a.m. Eastern. Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Welcome back to Truckers Life Radio. I'm your host, Ron Frazier. We are excited to be able to be talking to Debbie Wright, who is the producer of the documentary From Liberty to Captivity. Debbie, one of the things it says about your film is that it asks the question, how could America go from being a country that represents freedom to a country where sex trafficking and slavery are flourishing? Let's talk a little bit about that. That's a great question. What did you see? What were you finding as you produced this documentary that helped you answer that question?
Yeah, it really is the basis for the film, and it was an answer that we were going after. It was a question that we were going after the answer to on our journey. Going back to the history of slavery in the United States, there's probably no one who would say that slavery was something that, one, we should have had, and two, should have continued on, a day longer than it did. We're finally aware of the inhumane conditions of slaves being brought over into the United States, and obviously the shedding of innocent blood and all the things that happened to slaves, African-American slaves back in the, 16, 17, 1800s. And yet somehow this concept of sex trafficking, because we've sort of compartmentalized it, and because we're ignorant about what it really is, and the willingness, or, of the willingness, the stereotypes that we've bought into, we have caused this industry to explode in the United States. And worse yet, especially because of pornography, we have caused other countries that are, a lot more poor than the United States is, to take their children and their citizens and to abuse them on behalf of the mighty dollar that the US wields. And so we've actually hurt other countries because of our appetite for sex and our appetite for power, honestly. And because we've bought into these ideas that this is a victimless crime, so to speak. It's not even a crime. There's willing parties in this. And obviously the internet has made this so much easier. And so, what we found is that the reason why it seems to be flourishing is because there's a lack of acceptance of the reality of what it is. And there's also a sense of feeling overwhelmed. What can I do about this? What impact can I have, on an issue? People are throwing out numbers all the time about, the billions of dollars that this industry is generating around the world, and the hundreds of thousands of victims. And when you start to listen to those statistics, you become overwhelmed very easily and can be paralyzed into doing nothing. And that's the worst thing that can happen, because people can make a difference. And one of the things that I love about From Liberty to Captivity is that we did not feature, celebrities and stars who kind of drop into the issue, and then come back out of the issue and go back into their lives. We featured the stories of everyday citizens who came face to face with this issue in one way or another, and then decided to do something about it. And then you realize the impact that they have. And Jen's a great example, the woman I told you about that I talked to help me with the radio show. She was a mom who had somehow learned about human trafficking. She realized that there was a business near a strip mall in Lancaster that had the earmarks that there might be human trafficking operations based on what she had just learned, where the hours were, unusual hours, and there were usually men coming in and out of the business. And so she actually parked herself across the street and started documenting what she was seeing, and ultimately brought that to the police, and then partnered with law enforcement to bring down, which turned out to be a multi-state international ring, sex trafficking ring. And that's just one story in so many stories. And not everyone has to do something like that that's just so over the top. But everyone can do something about, for example, massage parlors in their communities. A lot of times if zoning regulations are passed and they're followed up on, obviously illegal, illicit massage parlors can't operate with, and follow the guidelines and the rules for zoning related to massage parlors. And so that's one way to sort of drive that business out of your community. There are coalitions that are set up in many different states and different counties where they're working with local law enforcement to identify where sex trafficking operations are happening in their communities. And they need the help of local citizens to get involved in all different kinds of activities that really can make a huge impact within their own communities. And if we did that community by community, we would drive it out of the United States. And that's setting aside pornography. And so, you say, how does a country that has a Liberty Bell and is all about freedom and the Constitution and all people are created equal, how is it, on the other hand, that we are, and it's generally accepted that we're basically the largest consumer of pornography, that we are fueling this industry in the United States and overseas. And a lot of that has to do with, as I mentioned before, stereotypes and misunderstandings that people have about this issue. The women that are walking on the streets, a lot of times people think, they're doing this willingly, or, they're doing it to feed a drug habit. And maybe to an extent, they are feeding a drug habit, but there are actually women who were forced into this and were given drugs who weren't drug addicts as a way of controlling them and creating an addiction in them so that they would have no choice. So even if they wanted to go get help, they wouldn't be able to get help because the addiction would be fueling them going back into the streets. Or pornography, for example, the images that are put on the screen of, somebody enjoying what's happening when the reality of what's happening to their bodies is just so brutal. And so when people really start to understand that it's happening in their own neighborhoods in different forms, when they understand the brutality of it and what actually occurs in these transactions and these crimes, so to speak, and then when they understand that they can actually do something about it, you do see changes in behavior. You do see people getting involved, which was one of the greatest things that I learned in my journey, both volunteering and producing the film. You do see, and most of the buyers are men, you do see men who, once they realize the trauma that this is causing the body and the spirit and the soul, and how it destroys the destinies of children who get dragged into this, and women, and they realize that, and there's actions that are taken to criminalize the buying, as we've seen in other countries. You do see changes in behavior. You do see so many men like yourself, like so many men who work in your organization who are involved in doing good and raising awareness. So this is not an issue that we should feel hopeless about. Just like slavery in the 1800s, people cared about that issue. They had more going against them than we do. It was legalized. Slavery was legalized in the United States, and the United States economy was dependent on slave labor. So, making that illegal and taking that out of the equation for the United States, it was actually illegal to try to help people run to freedom. People lost their businesses, their houses were burned down. I mean, there was all kinds of persecution for people who fought against slavery. We don't have that now. We are on their backs, fighting for continued freedom and what we stand for in the United States. And once people realize that they can get involved and they realize the impact of what they are doing, and they come together, we can see a significant change like we did with slavery that was legalized in the United States hundreds of years ago. And that's the reason why we did the film. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it if I didn't have great hope. And I've seen so many amazing stories coming out of people seeing the film that have, gotten back to me, and the impact that it had in communities that we toured with, people who have watched it, even at film festivals that we submitted it to. It ended up winning 10 awards, 4 for Best Documentary. But even the people at film festivals who see all kinds of films were so moved that they actually wanted to turn the screenings of the film at the festival into a rare awareness-raising events. It was their way of doing something in the community. And so the possibilities are endless of how we can get involved, how we can make an impact of it, and we certainly can end it. We just need to do our part in raising awareness, changing behaviors that need to change, criminalizing things that need to be criminalized, and getting involved to fight this.
Debbie, I hope our listeners are paying attention, our professional drivers and those of you in the trucking industry who are listening to this program. Debbie is sharing, you can make a difference, and you can, but you have to stand up. You have to be willing to be trained and understand what human trafficking is all about. And you can do that. And TFC Global is happy. We're here. We're willing to train you to understand and recognize human trafficking so that you can make a difference. And that's what it's going to take. So we need people like you, people like our listeners, to stand up and fight this battle, and we can win it.
This blog on tncradio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. 5 best scenic drives for truck drivers. One of the many benefits of being a truck driver is traveling the beautiful United States. Truck drivers spend their life on the road. Although they may get tired of driving, there's still routes and attractions most look forward to seeing. Whether it be cruising down the coast to California, driving in the Smoky Mountains, or passing through the Arizona desert, truck drivers all have their personal favorites. Here are the 5 most beautiful scenic drives rated by truck drivers. Pacific Coast Highway. The Pacific Coast in California, also called Highway 1, is one of the most iconic scenic drives in the United States. Driving along the Pacific Coast reminds you of a movie or TV show. It's about 650 miles long and runs from Capistrano Beach in Orange County to Leggett in northern Mendocino. San Juan Skyway. San Juan Skyway, a scenic byway in Colorado, is known for its million-dollar views. The byway goes across the San Juan National Forest and has provided truckers with beautiful views of the mountains and landscape. Beartooth Highway. Beartooth Highway in Montana is a 68-mile byway that runs through southwest Montana and northwest Wyoming and goes into Yellowstone National Park. Along this drive, you'll see one of the most diverse ecosystems accessible by vehicle in the United States. Keep in mind that the scenic highway closes in the winter due to adverse winter conditions and typically opens up on Memorial Day weekend. I-64 in West Virginia. West Virginia has some of the most beautiful landscapes on the East Coast. Driving down I-64 in West Virginia feels like you're in a painting. If you have time to stop along your truck route, check out Tamarack, located just off I-64 in Beckley, West Virginia. Tamarack is a unique culture center with art from local artisans and delicious food. If you want the full Appalachian experience, check out Tamarack. Utah's Route 12. Utah's Route 12 is one of the most scenic routes in the United States. It's often called the All-American Road. Also, there are 2 national parks at each end of the road, Bryce Canyon and Capitol Reef, and many other unique scenic views. This info blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Hey drivers, did you hear music on tncradio.live that you really liked? Or maybe you heard us interview an author of a book you'd like to read or listen to. You can get the books, music, and other products you hear about by going to our website at www.tncradio.live and clicking on the shopping cart.
tncradio.live, your commercial driver navigation station.
Welcome back to Truckers Life Radio with Ron Fraser, right here on tncradio.live.
Welcome to Truckers Life Radio. We're back. We're back with Debbie Wright. And Debbie, you and your team received quite an honor in January of 2019 when a flag was hung over the U.S. Capitol and a proclamation read to the U.S. House of Representatives in honor of the mission to use the film as a weapon to fight human trafficking. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that was quite a surprise. There was a congressman in Bucks County, based out of Bucks County, Pennsylvania, who, learned about the film and was very supportive of the film. And as we started touring with From Liberty to Captivity, in parallel to it being submitted to film festivals, we were going to churches and other places where we could show the film. And the way that we were using it as a weapon is that we were actually bringing in local experts and local organizations that were fighting against us in that community. We would show the film, we would have the panel of experts answering questions, and then we would make sure that we had ways for people to, before they left, to decide to get involved in their own communities to fight against us and to engage. So that was part of our mission, not just for people to see the film, but to provide opportunities for them and get involved with the issue where they were seeing the film. And we were opening up at the first, really the first stop on the tour, and the congressman came and he handed me a flag and a proclamation, and much to my surprise, and the team was really in tears, because many people who worked on the film, they weren't filmmakers, but they were activists against human trafficking. And so we all had this common bond, and so it was really a mission of love. It was a vision of love that we were working on. And he handed me this, and he told me that because of this unique mission for the film, and the impact that the film had had, that there was a proclamation that had been written up on behalf of the mission of the film, honoring the mission of the film to plant seeds of hope and encourage people to get involved with the issue. And the proclamation was read on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives, and a flag was flown over the Capitol in honor. And really, it was so much less about us and the work that we did, and it was a lot more about the power of the people who were in the film, all the survivors, male and female, who were in the film, telling their stories and really opening up their lives and their hearts and trusting us with these very painful stories, but with so much hope that they were expressing in the film, and other people who were fighting against it. And I do want to touch on the role that that you guys played in the film, because it was really amazing. We, as I mentioned, we wanted to feature what was happening in the trucking industry, and we had sort of carte blanche to film. And we actually went to your location. I can't remember where it was, but there were trucks there. We were able to film a couple of reenactments of stories that we had heard about, of these heroes within the trucking industry. One being Sam, who was a chaplain out of Canada. And it actually is the opening scene for the entire film. It was so powerful. It's on our poster that was shared all over the place, an image from that reenactment, how he intervened in a situation where a girl had been kidnapped. She had been brought to a truck stop by these two women. She was sold to a truck driver, and basically they said, you can do whatever you want. She was obviously, raped. And when the gentleman had fallen asleep, she got out of the truck, but she didn't know where she was. She didn't know where to go. And she saw the cross with the LED lights. And she just knew that this might be a place where she could get help. And she ran towards that cross, and Sam, the chaplain, then, helped her. And it was such a great story of him intervening in that situation. But it wasn't the only story that we were able to share in the film, in terms of other operations that were broken up because of truck drivers who cared about this issue and saw something that didn't seem right, and they're relating to the fact that they have children and grandchildren, and they don't want this to happen. So we were able to do a whole segment about the trucking industry, and people just reacted so strongly to the power of stories like that were in the film, that it had an impact. Obviously on that, the flag that was raised above the Capitol, and, the awards that it won at film festivals. It was actually nominated for a Global Humanitarian Award, and all of that is not a testament to us. We were just the people who were carrying the story and putting it together. It was really a testament to the heroes like you guys, who fight on the front lines every day on behalf of those who are victimized. And by the way, victims are not just only those who are being sold for sex. Sadly, people who get caught up, especially in pornography or in this habitual buying of sex trafficking victims, are often in this cycle that is so hard to break and is so painful. It destroys their marriages. It destroys their lives in so many different ways, and they want to have that cycle broken. They're not feeling good about themselves, and they don't know how to get out of this cycle. And I'm just so grateful for the work that you guys do to help them get out of that cycle and to go into the destiny that God has for them, because there are many levels of oppression and victimization that occur in this, and there are just so many different ways that people can get help. So that really is, why From Liberty to Captivity was so well received, because of the power of these stories and the hope and inspiration that it gave people that they can get involved.
Good. Well, Debbie, we try our hardest to train our drivers and our professional truck drivers and their families and all of those people who are involved in the trucking industry, what it's like to be involved in a human trafficking situation. We know it's out there. We challenge our drivers all the time to contact us. We'll train you. We'll help you recognize it. And if you've got an addiction to pornography, we have counselors here that are willing to help you. But Debbie, before in our last few minutes here, tell us what you're doing now, and briefly tell us how someone might get involved with your organization or connect with you, or whatever opportunity you have for them. Share with us how they might be able to contact you.
So thank you so much for this opportunity. And I just want to thank you for the hard work that everybody does at TFC. I had such a great experience before we actually started on the film and after with you guys. And I just am really honored to have this opportunity. Much to our surprise, again, From Liberty to Captivity was offered 2 distribution deals coming out of the film festival tour that it was on. And we went with Gravitas Ventures. They are the largest distributor of independent documentaries in North America. So you can actually go to FromLibertyToCaptivity.com to watch the film. There's many different ways to watch it, learn more about it. That would be the first thing I would say to people, is to educate yourself. And From Liberty to Captivity is a great way to start in terms of watching the film and then encouraging others to watch it. And then I would say, take a look at your passions and your interests and how you can lend them to this issue. There are people who work with aftercare homes in helping victims plant gardens. I mean, there's many different ways, depending on who you are and what your passions are, that you can get involved. So I would say then do some research on local organizations and how you could get involved. So right now where the film is, it's just in distribution. And when there's opportunities for me to talk about the film, I do that. We're not really involved as a regular organization. We're here to support and undergird other organizations that are involved in the fight. And we do that through raising awareness and trying to make the film available to people so that they can achieve their missions. And so, that's how I would say that you can start your first step towards making a difference. In terms of what I'm working on now, I went on to do a second film, which is on a completely unrelated topic, and that went through film festivals and won several awards, which we are really excited about. And I've now started a documentary series, somewhat related, about a little known story about slavery and during the Civil War. You can look it up. It's called Contraband of War. The National Park Service in Virginia has a nice little story about it. But again, it highlights, what happened in slavery in the beginning of the Atlantic slave trade, and what happened in the Civil War to help some slaves run to freedom at the Union camp that was based in Fort Monroe, Virginia. And because these slaves were considered property, the general who was in charge of the Union camp was able to take them in, and the slave owners weren't able to take them back. And because of that, thousands of slaves were freed. And there are generations later of people who married in communities who blossomed as a result of this, and people who are carrying forth the story. So we're looking to do a documentary series that sort of highlights that important part of our history.
Well, Debbie, we want to thank you for joining us this evening, for being part of our program, for the information that you've relayed to us, and just hopefully encouraging our listeners to take a proactive part in helping to fight human trafficking, helping to bring awareness to our communities, and especially to our trucking community and to our churches, and for all the work that you and your team have done. We want to thank you. Debbie, thanks again.
Thank you very much for all you do, and all the truckers that are out there. Fight this issue. We can do it together.
I hope you enjoyed the show. Let us hear from you. Send email to truckerslife@tncradio.live. Stay tuned.
Do you have the TNCRadio.live app? It's free and easy to download. Just go to app.tncradio.live, Google Play, or the App Store. Get access to live streaming radio developed by drivers for drivers. Download the TNCRadio.live app today.
Don't forget, you can hear all of our TNC Radio primetime shows again on our podcasts. Just go to tncradio.live/podcasts or search for tncradio.live wherever you listen to podcasts.